Hey guys, I'm Astrofunk, and today I want to start going over. I'm going to be putting up videos weekly now. It's going to be various different things. For starters, right now I'm going to be doing an audio device series on all the devices in live. This first video is going to cover the EQ3, EQ8, and the auto filter. And then throughout the weeks, I might just start putting up more of my music, maybe performance videos, and maybe just start doing videos of me when I'm just working on stuff in the studio and kind of see what happens. So I hope you enjoy the videos and you can learn some stuff from these audio device videos. And as well, I don't really know how many it's going to be broken up into at this point. This first one covers 3 devices. We'll see. Maybe if the videos are too long, I'll just start doing them individually. So anyways, hope you enjoy and have fun. Hey guys, alright, so the first audio device we're going to talk about is the EQ3. This is a 3-band EQ. If you're a DJ, you probably are familiar with these. If you've ever used a Pioneer mixer, or most mixers generally for DJing are about 3 bands unless you use an Allen and Heath. So basically, as you can tell, it's set up as usual. You have your low band, your mid range, and your high band. 0 decibels is the nominal position where it's not attenuated or there's nothing else, there's no frequencies being taken out. Below that you have your kill switches, so as you play it, so you can see that you can just kill certain frequencies if you want to, if you don't want to actually use the knobs. The lower section is kind of what controls and forms how the upper section is going to function. So basically these are what these two here are going to set your frequency ranges. It defaults at 250 Hertz, and below is going to be your low frequencies, and your high frequencies are going to be 2500 Hertz and above. So if I pull this up just to give you an idea, let's say 250 Hertz is somewhere maybe like probably around right here. This is at 200, so yeah, 250 is probably right here. So anything 250 Hertz and below is essentially going to be your low frequencies. Everything from 250 Hertz to 2500 Hertz, which is probably somewhere in this area, is going to be your mid-range, which is what this knob is going to affect here. And then your highs are going to be basically everything from 2500 Hertz and above by the default positions that are set up for this plugin. This middle section essentially is going to control the curves of the basically the cut curves. So I actually set up 2 examples, which is why I have the EQ8 up as well. This curve here is more subtle. This is 24 decibel per octave. So when you have it set like this, it's going to be a smoother transition, and then 48 decibels per octave is going to be a sharper cut like this, which will be a little more exaggerated. And I'll cut these two and just leave the highs on, and I'll switch between these two, and you can kind of hear that with 48 decibels, it's sharper and it has a little more resonance. So here it is with just with a 24 decibel per octave cut. So you can hear that obviously it's cutting it a lot sharper. There's less highs. It has a little more resonance and it's sharper. So essentially though too, when you use the 48 decibel cut, it takes a little more CPU. But again, unless you're using a really old computer, CPU for something like this shouldn't be a huge deal. So that's it for this section on the EQ3, and then we're going to move on into the next section, into the EQ8. Hey, okay, so I'm back here, and in this section we're going to go over the EQ8, which is the main EQ in live. It is called the EQ8 because it has 8 different bands to choose from that you can use for EQing purposes. So what I'm going to do in this first part is I'm going to go over the different filter types, and then also kind of explain what's going on here on the left, or it changes when you make it larger. This is where the frequency is now and the gain. I'll actually just keep it small for now. I'll probably just switch between if it gets confusing. So to start off, I'm going to make it larger, but to start off, the first filter type is a low cut or a high pass. You might hear someone say high pass or low cut. It's the same thing. It's just a different term because they're just talking about the different sides. Because when you use this, you're cutting everything below this. So you're cutting the lows and you're letting the highs pass through. This is a 48 dB cut, which is why it says ×4. This is the same thing except it's only one of them, which is 12 dB cut. You can see it's a lot less steep. And you could, if from the first section with the EQ3, you can see what I'm talking about. Again, there's just, that's what the 24 and the 48 was. Now with the low cut frequencies, it's going to allow you to the low cut like parameters, it's going to allow you to move the different frequency amounts with this knob, which when you like make it larger, it's right here. There is no gain control with the low cut high pass. It does have a Q setting, which is going to create, you know, a little boost right before it cuts, or you can kind of bring it down and make it very linear. I think it defaults at 0.71, but when you kind of boost it, this is called like a resonance peak, and it kind of will exaggerate the sound right before the cut. You can get pretty extreme amounts, so you need to be careful with it, but just to get an idea of what that does. So without the resonance peak, it's a little smoother, but it's nice sometimes, like you'll want to use a resonance peak on that. So those are really just the controls for the low cut or the high pass. If we go to the next filter type, we have a low shelf, which essentially, let's see, this one does have gain control, so you basically would use it like that. Again, you can adjust the frequency up here. Your gain, either you want to attenuate the signal or cut out parts of the signal. And then this is your Q setting again, which I will go over in a minute. But if you can tell, a lower Q setting generally is more linear, where as you go up, it's going to kind of exaggerate. And again, it creates these resonant peaks and then a dip with the shelf. So if you can see the gain control, it's going to cut out the low end here. So that's what those are. That's called a low shelf. The next filter type is a bell curve, or like a bell. So again, it has frequency settings, has gain settings. Either you're going to attenuate or take away from the signal, bringing things down or adding more of the signal in. Your Q basically controls the bell or the width and how much it's going to, how much frequency range it's going to be affected. So a lower Q is going to be very large, as you can tell. The higher you get, it's going to get narrower and narrower. As you go up again with larger, you have your frequency, your gain, and then this controls your Q setting here depending on which one is selected or highlighted. So that is it for the bell. The next type of filter type is a notch filter. So essentially what's going on with this notch filter is it's allowing all of the stuff outside of the notch to still be passed through and played, and anything in between here is going to be cut out of your signal. So and with the notch filter, it also does not have a gain control. It only has the frequency band to select, and then your Q point, which is going to make it wider or smaller on how much frequency area that's going to be affected. The next type, the last three are basically just repeating of the first three, but in the opposite direction. So you're going to have a high shelf this time, so your gain controls bring it up. Your Q again is going to change the exaggeration of the cut. You can you create a resonance peak here, right, where it starts to lift, and then where it will dip down. Or you keep it flat, it's going to be more linear. So same thing there, high cut, and then this time you have a 12 dB per octave, but this is a high cut or a low pass, which essentially is, like I said, is just a reverse of what the original first two were. And then you have a 48 decibel per octave, high cut, low pass. So that's it for at least the different filter types, and you can tell that you have 8 different filter types to choose from. On-off switches to activate or not activate for each individual channel. As it gets larger, everything's just on, rather than having these settings over here. They kind of each fall into their own lane. So you have, again, your frequency, your gain control for that specific band, the Q setting, and your different filter types you can choose from, and an on-off switch. So if we go over to the next section, this is called Audition Mode. Audition. And essentially what you can do when you're using this is if you select a specific frequency, like normally if you don't have it on, but when you use Audition Mode, it'll actually solo the frequencies that are being attenuated. Rather than just hearing the whole signal. This is the on and off switch for your visualizer. And then if we go to the next section below, gets a little advanced, I guess, especially if you're new to EQ. But there's three different mode types. Stereo, which is what you're going to use most of the time. It's going to just basically have one signal across the entire field, your stereo signal, that you'll affect both the left and the right together. And then it goes into left or right or mid and side, and these are different types of EQing techniques. So when you turn that on, this section, the edit section, actually becomes activated. And if you do left right now you're on the left, and then on this one you're on the right. So essentially you can EQ the left channel separately from the right channel. So you can see that it makes a change. Maybe I'll just boost the right channel. So you can hear it now in the sound. So that's essentially what's going on there. Mid-side is pretty powerful technique. It's a little advanced, but basically it's you can separate the mids from the sides. So the mid signal is going to be anything that is the same on both the left and the right channel. Anything that differentiates between the left and the right channel is going to be considered the side. So I don't know how much difference this loop has, but let's see if we can maybe just hear the sides. So you can kind of hear it there, but that's essentially what these different settings do. For the most part, you're going to be using stereo to do your EQing. And if we kind of move on from here, we have Adaptive Q Setting. Now this is based off some analog style EQs, and it defaults as on. I usually use it on as well. But if you kind of notice, especially if you're using a bell curve, it gets narrower as you lift it, whereas if it was off, it doesn't get narrower, it stays the same. So that's what Adaptive Q does. It's up to you if you want it on or off. It defaults as on, but at least you now know what that does. And then you have the scale tool and the gain are kind of the last two on here besides the analyzer, which really just changes the settings of your analyzer. You can kind of look into the different settings and what you might want it set up to. It really depends on what you're doing. If you're looking at a whole mix, you might want to slow down how quickly it refreshes so you can kind of see a song on a whole scale rather than, really quick bursts. But if we go back to the scale portion, essentially here at 100%, basically what you did is it's going to EQ it that specific way. If you have all the settings kind of set up how you want them, but it's a little bit too extreme, you could start scaling it down and it will mathematically bring it down that you don't have to actually move all the stuff again and change the ratios you kind of have between all your different filter types. So you can go down, and obviously 0 would be pretty low. Like it doesn't really actually, nothing even happens at that point. And then you can kind of go negative and reverse all the way up to 200% of what you had EQ'd. And then if you scale all the way up, you can go up to 200% and exaggerate what you had EQ'd, but 100% is kind of just the normal point of where you're at. So that's what that tool does. Might be something you want to explore. And then lastly for this, there's the gain, which again, when you're EQing, you might be adding in new frequencies, which might make the signal a lot louder and you want to bring it back down, or you might be EQing a lot of the frequencies out, so you might want to bring it back up and just turn up the gain a little bit. So essentially that covers the whole thing for the EQ8. Maybe one other thing to point out, which I should have pointed out on the EQ3, is these are on pretty much all the devices. But it is your hot swap button. So if you go to hot swap, it'll open up your different filter presets and you can go to those and select them without having to, because if you don't use the hot swap, it's just going to open up another instance. So it allows you to kind of change through your presets without having to keep opening new EQs. This as well is going to be, if you wanted to save some of your own settings, if you like something, you can do it that way. I'm not going to save that. Also, another thing to point out with EQ8, I don't believe, depending if you're new to this, yeah, you need to put on oversampling and set that as your default. If you want it to oversample, it'll be a higher quality EQ than without the oversampling. So it doesn't default as oversampled, so if you want higher quality, it's going to take more CPU, but you'll want to right click and then you'll have to save. You'll want a blank template actually though, so EQ8. Not gonna. All right, hang on, audio effects. EQ8. Okay, mine's already set as default to oversampling, but you would just go, once you turn that on, and if you left it like this, you could just go save as default preset. So every time you open up your EQ8, it'll always be on oversample mode. And again, this is your on-off button, and then lastly, this notch will make it larger. If you don't want to use that, just double click, and it makes it larger, smaller. So that's pretty much everything for the EQ8. I hope this part helped, and we will move on to the next section after this, and we'll talk about the auto filter. Hey guys, alright, so this is the last section that I want to get into, and in this section we're going to talk about the auto filter. There's going to be a lot of similarities between this and the EQ8 as well. The first thing I want to talk about is the different filter types that are on the auto filter. Most of them are the same. The only one that's different is this one. But to get started, we have a high cut, low pass. We have a low cut, high pass. We have a band pass, which is a new one. Basically, anything that is in between here is what is going to allow to be passed through the filters. So if you just take a listen. So just like that's basically what's happening there. And then the last one is a notch filter, which you also had in the EQ8. It's going to cut out anything that is in between these sections here, and everything else on this side and on this side is going to be able to pass through the filter. And just to the right, you have your frequency settings and you have your Q settings, just like on the EQ8. So the first section I'm going to get into, to the right of it, is going to be the LFO section. And basically an LFO is a low frequency oscillator. If you have any experience at all with synthesis or working with synthesizers, you know they push out the oscillators. They have different types of waves. They have saw waves, sine waves, triangle waves, etc. So essentially what LFOs are used for is actually modulating signals, because LFOs don't actually put out any audible noise, but they still create the shape of the wave. So an LFO that's set to sine wave is going to move like a sine wave. And what happens when you use it with this is that if you turn the amount up, it's actually going to modulate the frequency up and down to the shape of this sine wave or square wave, triangle, saw, reverse saw, or noise, random noise waves basically. So that's basically what that does. So if you just want to hear, this is without any LFO attached to it. And then this is all the way up. And basically why it's going opposite from left to right is because of the phase. When it's at 180 degrees, the right and the left are 180 degrees out of phase. So as the right goes up, the left goes down. As the left goes up, the right goes down. If you go to 360 degrees or 0 degrees, they're going to be completely in phase, and they're both going to go down together, and they're both going to go up together. And then anything in between is just kind of a variation between 180 and 360, or 0 to 180. So to hear it, it's just at 360. So that's what the phase does. Above the phase, you have the rate, and you can set rates either in hertz, or you can have it tempo synced to your track. So when it's in this mode, it's going to be synced to the 128 BPM we have right now, and you can have it move in, you know, thirds. You can have it move in quarter notes, eighth notes, etc. And that's basically what happens there. And as you can notice, that this does change when you go from different settings. So both of them have phase, and it carries over. The only difference between them is when you're in hertz mode, it has like a spin, and basically it kind of just makes a spinning sound. It just offsets the LFOs. So if you listen, you can hear how they kind of spin, but without it. So that's basically what spin does, but that's only active when you are in hertz mode. When you're in beat mode, basically, it's just going to offset the starting point of the LFO. So rather than start from the wave that is set as the LFO wave shape, it's just going to start at a different position onto the wave. So that's what that does. The next section I want to cover is the envelope section, and basically this is actually going to be on quite a few plugins as well later, but the envelope section basically takes the audio coming from the channel, so this drum loop that's playing through, and as the loop gets louder, if you have this turned up, as you turn it up, it's going to affect, it does the same thing, it's going to affect the frequency, and as you turn it up, as the loop gets louder, it's going to open up the filter more. So if you just take a listen, and this is no effect, and then if you go backwards, it's actually going to turn down the filter as the signal comes in louder from this channel. And then the attack and release, basically the attack is how quickly is this envelope going to turn up as the signal comes in, and then the release is how quickly is it going to turn back down. So if you play with this, you can get some pretty interesting effects. So you can see that's actually what's going on there. The next section I want to talk about, and sidechaining is going to be on a lot of different audio devices later as well, and it's a very important aspect, especially with compressors, which will be in another section. But sidechaining, essentially what that means is you're bringing a signal in from another source to affect this unit. And in this case, just say you're using the envelope, and we would pull the signal from, so rather than pulling the signal from the channel you're on to modulate the envelope, you'll have a different sound source modulating the envelope. So in this case, what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to pull up this channel where I have a pad, and I'm using a sidechain on it from the auto filter, which this is not auto filter, just say this is pad. So it's going to actually pull the signal from the auto filter and modulate this envelope by using a sidechain. So this is the signal without any filtering. Whoops. So basically now I don't have the sidechain activated, but when I activate the sidechain, as the audio signal comes in from the auto filter channel that has that drum loop is going to start affecting the envelope and how quickly this opens and closes. So now you can hear it without sidechain, and here's with sidechain. And you can see that the signal's coming in there. Basically, after you have basically where you choose your audio from to affect the source, and then you can choose where on the source you're going to have the signal come from. Basically, pre-effects, if you look at this is an instrument, and then once you get past the instrument, this is where the effects begin. So if you're pre-effects, it's going to pull the signal directly from the instrument and disregard all the effects that are after it. If you do post effects, it's going to pull the signal, say we're on this channel, and it's going to have the instrument that goes into the auto filter. It's going to pull the signal past the auto filter, and that's where the signal is going to be pulled from, which if you have a lot of effects on it, it can completely change the sound. That will have an effect on how the envelope is affected as well. The last and final version is the post mixer, which means it's going to pull the signal past when it comes out of this mixer. So if you have any panning automated on there, or if the signal's panned at all, or if you have the fader maybe being automated up and down, that's going to affect the signal that's coming into this device as well. So that's what that does. And then under it you have gain control, which you can actually put more gain in here to affect the envelope more, or you can take down the gain if it's too much, you know, because that depends. Like, you don't want to maybe change the gain that's going on in the mix. You might just want to control how much it affects in the plugin. So that's what that is there for. After that, there's the dry to wet ratio, and this is going to be seen a lot on other time-based effects, also with the compressors using sidechain as well. But if you have the signal set to 100% wet, it's only going to be pulling the signal from the auto filter channel that we have selected here and modulating this envelope. If you set it to 50%, it's going to take half from this pad channel to modulate this envelope, and it's going to take half from this auto filter channel to modulate the envelope. And then 0% is basically only from this specific channel that the auto filter is on will it be pulling in signal, which again at that point just turn off the sidechain. You don't need a sidechain activated. So that's it for that. The last section I'm going to talk about on this unit is the Quantize Beat section, which is pretty cool because you actually get some interesting effects. Now if you're on, let's just say we're on the LFO, and if this isn't on, it kind of just has a smooth transition. Okay. Anyways, so if you turn on the Quantize Beat, what this basically does is that it makes these filters or the LFO or the envelope move in tempo synchronized beats. So it works in like 16th notes. So 0.5 is like a 30-second note, and 16th is 1 bar. So if you listen to it now, if you turn it back on, it has more jagged movements. If you do it at 0.5, so that's basically for the auto filter. You can get very creative with this, even though it seems like a really simple unit. There's a lot going on. Again, like using the Quantized Beat is really cool. I think you can get some really interesting stuff. Playing around with side chains to affect your sounds. You can really create a lot of movement rather than just filtering something down with this unit, and that's kind of what's really important a lot in electronic music, is giving your sounds personality. So I hope these sections all help between the EQ3, the EQ8, and the auto filter, and excited to get on moving on to the next section. And if you have any questions, comments, or maybe if I was wrong about something, feel free to correct me, please. Until next time, enjoy and have fun.